What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to episode 9 of the show with no name. With me, as always, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is David. I screwed up my intro. That might be the first time. My name is David, and with me, as always, is Pastor Leo. Hello, Pastor
everyone.
Leo. Man, everybody probably just shut the podcast off.
Yeah,
They're like, David's off his game today.
Yep. He ruined it.
Yep.
We're done.
Well, we'll see you next time.
Yep.
This has been Romans 15, 1 through 13. Are the lights changing colors today? Is that what you set them as?
I tried
boy.
it.
Oh boy. I'm sorry. I don't. Maybe you wanted it to be like a surprise for everybody. I just caught it as I'm looking at you in my peripheral vision, and now I'm very distracted. I'm going to be listening to you and then just like slowly turn farther. Like, ooh, it's blue now.
We're going to spend the next half hour just staring at the wall.
Yeah. I want to. By the end of the episode, I will have the sequence memorized.
Mm-hmm.
That's my new goal.
That's cool.
Thank you, Leo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. How are things?
Things are going really well.
Yeah, we haven't
It's
recorded in
cold,
a couple
though.
weeks. It is.
It was.
It's warmer than it was, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's been worse.
Right.
Like when the wind chill was negative 62 at the airport.
That was fun. That was.
Did you go
really
outside
fun.
at all during that fun time?
Did anybody?
I did on Friday of last week,
mm-hmm.
and then Saturday, our entire family, we literally didn't go outside. We didn't
Right.
open the door to our home on Saturday.
It was just brutal.
Yeah. We were supposed to have a basketball game Friday, and it got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we still, like, the kids still had school. I assume your kids still had school. And then my team practiced. So we were out and about on Friday, and it was, I think I got done with practice at 7:45 or something. Got home a little after 8. It was so cold. And then it was I get done with practice, and I have a text from Joanna like, can you pick these two things up from the store?
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to Walmart. I think I got home at 8:30 or something, and I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in the South, Oklahoma, where we lived before here, and he was asking like what the weather was like or whatever, and I was like, well, the wind chill is like negative 54 right now. And he's like, oh my word, are you just everybody hunkering down? I was like, no, I just went to Walmart after practice. We probably should be hunkering down, but we're just so used to it at this point.
We have a family who just got here from the Philippines.
Is that the guy I met at the Carinderia?
Jeremiah? Jay.
Yeah, I
is
think it
his
was
name.
Jay.
Yeah, Jay and his family
Okay.
just got here.
Well, shout out to Jay.
Yes.
What's up, Jay?
Yay. Experience the North Dakota cold.
Yeah, oh my word, what a terrible time. Because if he would have moved in, if their family gets here in November, and you're like, oh, this North Dakota winter, and then you have the last couple months, you're like, well, this isn't so bad. But now they just think it's like that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh boy, did they leave, or are they still here?
They're still here.
Okay, that's good. What do your families back in the Philippines think when you tell them what the weather is like?
Oh, I don't think they can imagine
Yeah.
what it's like, because there it's like, what, 90s, 80s the whole year?
What's the coldest you remember as a child in the Philippines?
Well, what was that? When we went to a city called Baguio, that was like 10 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
What was that? Times 2 plus 30.
Your 10 degrees is like the high 40s, isn't it?
Right.
Like 48, 49.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that cold. I
It's
still
cool,
remember
though.
though.
It's cool.
It's cool.
And when you had only ever experienced 80s
Right.
and 90s, you were probably freezing.
And because it's a popular place to go to
because of that?
because of that for the tourists, especially those who come from
Okay.
countries like
Is it
the U.S.
A mountainous area? Why is it so cold there?
It's up in the mountain. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's I was looking at them. They were walking around in shorts, t-shirts, and I was like, how are they dealing with this? Now I've done almost 10 years of North Dakota cold.
Yeah, it wouldn't phase you at all.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I'm glad we could slowly break you down and turn you into one of us Midwesterners. I'm not a North Dakotan, but I am a Midwesterner, and
Right.
we're a special breed. That's the nice way to say it.
Well, yeah.
and you're
We
one of
are.
us now.
I've been hardened.
Yeah, there you go.
There.
I don't know if that sounds sad, but it's in a good way.
I've experienced it. Like when Gabriel was born, that was December of 2017.
Okay.
And that was when we had a week stretch of minus 20 weather.
Good times.
And since Gabriel was Andy was not feeling well when he came out, so he had some of that phlegm in his lungs.
Okay.
So he had to stay in the hospital for about a week.
Oof.
That same week. So we had to go out and be with him for 1 week. So we had to go outside in that weather. So that was, I don't know.
Not a good time.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, hopefully wherever you are right now as you listen to this, it's nice and warm, even if you're just inside. Hopefully you're not in my office. Yesterday we played a game around the office where I brought a can of a beverage I had that was just sitting in my office, and then a can that had been in the fridge overnight, around to 7 different staff members, and asked them which one was in the fridge, and only 4 of them guessed correctly.
I was one of them.
You did guess correctly, but it was very difficult to tell which was
very
which.
difficult to tell.
It's
It was
a little,
that cold.
It's a little cold back in the office/recording studio we have
Is
back
it
there.
warmer now?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
no. It's chilly
All right.
today. I'm okay with it. I'd rather have that than hot. So I will survive.
If I need something chilled, I'll put it in
just
your
set it
room.
on my desk.
Yeah.
I'll take care of that for you. We are finally to Romans 15. There's only 2 chapters left.
Yes.
2. We're not quite ready to announce our next book yet, but we're close to ready to announce. So Romans 15, we're in verses 1 through 13. If you haven't read those yet, pause us real quick and go read them. Or just as I vamp here and get us ready to get started, just read them real quick. It's 13 verses. You can knock those out pretty quick. But we really encourage you, if you've missed any, go back and listen, because all of these build on each other. And maybe even more important than listening, go back and read. Right. You know, if you missed last week and you're like, I don't have 40 minutes to catch up on the podcast, just go read chapter 14 and make sure that you're caught up in your reading. I think the teaching from Pastor Leo is great, but it's certainly not better than the Bible.
Yes.
No offense, Leo.
None taken.
Okay, good.
I'm standing on the shoulder of Paul.
Leo is not better than the Bible, confirmed on the Grow podcast. But yeah, make sure you're reading along with us so that you know what we're talking about and get the most out of the podcast. But yeah, we're so glad that you're here with us. And Leo, why don't you give us our summary of these 13 verses at the beginning of Romans 15?
All right. So for this one, Paul continues to talk to those who are quote unquote strong and those who are quote unquote weak in the faith. We talked about it at length in episodes 7 and 8. So if you haven't seen it, you haven't heard it, go back and watch it. Pause this one. Well, Paul continues to appeal for tolerance and respect by calling on all of us to accept one another. It sounds like it's a thing. Like he's really stressing this out. So it must be something that's been going on during that time. So in doing so, we are fulfilling God's plan to bring Jews and Gentiles together as one people of God.
So this is shocking to read, that us humans not getting along with one another is not a brand new thing.
I know, right?
Boy, I thought we had invented it here in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Apparently I was wrong.
Dead wrong.
And even in, this is the early church, and this was already something that they're struggling with, right? These are like people are alive that hung out with Jesus on like physically on earth, and we already were having these problems of not respecting each other, not accepting one another, not getting along.
It's been an issue.
Yeah.
And
remains to be an issue.
It remains to be an issue.
Yeah.
Should we say it's getting worse? I don't think so, because it's like 2,000 years.
Right. We just can't get out of our own way.
Like it's nature, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's disunity has always been a major problem with God's people. Surprisingly, if you haven't noticed it, where have you been?
I mean, and also, can I come? Because, man, if you're somewhere where there's no disunity, it'd be great.
If you're in a church that has no disunity,
then you're not a part of New Hope or any other church that exists on the planet.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Maybe if you're, you start a church and you're the only person in that church.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't
Right.
allow any other members. Maybe that would.
Hey, that's an idea
Yeah.
for PH.
I don't think that's a good one at all.
Just kidding, though.
But yeah,
But-
and we see it all through the Bible, even
Yeah.
back in the Old Testament too,
Yep.
right?
We see civil wars and family feuds and people in jeopardy. The time is right. Or if the price is right, as long as there are no Hollywood squares.
Okay, all right.
Right?
No, I get what you're doing, Leo.
What was that one with the
Wheel of Fortune?
The Wheel of Fortune. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh boy. That's.
Move on. Time to move on from game shows.
Yeah, game shows. Okay, so in the New Testament, almost every local church had divisions to contend with as well.
Yeah.
So Paul talked to the Corinthians. The Corinthians were divided over human leaders, and some of the members were even suing each other. Wow, that's
fun.
we're talking about first century here. So fun. All right. So he also talked to the Galatians. The Galatians were biting and devouring one another. Wow, is it literal?
It's aggressive.
though?
That's I hope not. I think he was using a metaphor.
That's
but
scary, but okay. So the Ephesians and the Colossians, on the other hand, had to be reminded of the importance of Christian unity. You will see that in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 to 3, and Colossians chapter 2, verses 1 to 2. And in the church at Philippi, 2 women were causing division in the church. So some of these problems are a result of the backgrounds of the believers. Still is, even today.
Yeah.
So the Jews come from a very strict legalistic background. We talked about that many times when we went through the book of Romans, especially at the beginning. The Gentiles, of course, were the opposite. So here's the thing. If each Christian had kept his convictions to himself, even today, if we would keep our convictions to ourselves, there would have been no problem. But they began to criticize and judge one another. Unfortunately, even today, we have similar problems with many gray areas of life that are not clearly right or wrong to every believer. Again, we talked about it at length, episode 7 and 8. That was a fun one, so go listen to those. So for the gray areas, Paul encourages us that it's possible for us to disagree on non-essentials and still maintain unity in the church.
you had that quote from Augustine. Was it last episode, 2 episodes ago, something like that?
Yeah.
The in essentials unity.
I think
in
that was episode 7.
okay. In non-essentials liberty, and
In
all things charity.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Like this disunity wasn't over it. Well, sometimes it was, but for most of these, and what we're talking about here wasn't like, is Jesus the Son of God? Like, no, that's not. Like, Paul would have a much harsher stance on those type of topics, right? This is just, can we stop arguing about like what type of material your pants have to be made out of on Sunday mornings? Like, it's just, goodness gracious, everybody.
And shoulder length hair for pastors.
It's a big one.
Or something like that.
My dad told me this story. So he was in college in the 70s at a Bible college. And he played basketball. They were playing another Bible college. And at his college, they all had like the long 70s hair. And he said the entire game, the other team was, they were cussing at them and just using all sorts of terrible language. And they were dirty players. And at the end of the game, through the handshake line, they literally handed out tracts to my dad's team because their hair was long.
Wow.
It's just, again, so focused on the things that don't matter and ignoring caring about people and loving one another. And I think love is a big issue here.
It is. True Christian love is not selfish. That's the key factor, love.
Yeah.
True Christian love seeks to share with others and make others happy. Make others happy. Make others happy. Make others happy. You can't stop. There's not enough times to repeat that just to stress it out. Make others happy. If we really love the quote-unquote weaker Christians, those you think that are weaker, then there must be a willingness to help one another and help them along in their spiritual development. See, here's the thing. A person who is spiritually mature is willing to give up his or her rights so others might be helped spiritually. So to that person, if you're going to give up your rights, it's not a burden. And many people think that way. Like, if I'm going to give up my rights, it's a burden. I don't want to do it. But it's not a burden. It is a blessing. In the same way that parents make sacrifices for their children, they're not going to say, I'm going to make this sacrifice. It's such a burden. And I'm going to do this just for my kid. I mean, kidding. You're kidding me? No, right? It's a blessing to give up your right to help others along. So Abraham's words to Lot is still applicable today. How long was Abraham? Like 6,000 years ago? Right? More or less?
Best we can guess, yeah.
Right? So 6,000 years ago, 6,000 years later, it still applies. There must be and there should be no arguing between you and me or between your people and my people. We are all brothers and sisters, if I may add. That's Genesis chapter 13, verse 8. See? 6,000 years later, we're still dealing with this. So Jesus also prayed for the unity of the church to the glory of God in John 17, verses 20 to 26. So if Jesus made it a point to pray for something like this, I think it's only logical that we make it a point to receive one another, that we make it a point to edify one another, that we make it a point to please one another. Why? It's all to the glory of God.
We get to verse 7, and it seems kind of like a good wrap up of his point about how we should have unity. He says, "Accept one another, then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God."
That's right. Paul wraps it up by talking about how God sent Jesus so that the Jews and the Gentiles might be able to praise God. So Paul also reminds the people in the church at Rome how this was predicted in the Old Testament in verses 9 to 12. So in verse 7, Paul is drawing a comparison. We should accept one another in the same way that Christ has accepted us. So here's the thing. I want you to think about this. For those of you who are listening, just really pause and think about this. What right do we have to refuse fellowship with a person whom Christ himself has accepted into the body?
Yeah, we put ourselves in a higher position than Jesus in that thing, and yeah, again, if we agree on the deity of Jesus, salvation through grace alone, the non-essentials they're just meaningless. It doesn't mean that they're not something that can be important in my life, right? Like we talked about that the last couple of weeks as well, right? The things I'm convicted about are important to me.
Yeah.
But they're not important to you in your life specifically because you might be convicted about different things. Again, we're talking about non-essentials.
That's right.
But man, we just prioritize those non-essentials over the essentials so often.
And we try to shove them down other people's throats too.
So yes, we do.
It's at this point, from verse 8, Paul shows us how the fulfillment of God's promises brings blessing to both Jews and Gentiles. So Paul tells us that Jesus became a servant of the Jews for two reasons. First reason is to confirm the promises made to Abraham and the patriarchs. And the second reason is so the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. So this is a repeat of what Paul said way back in Romans 1, verse 16. So we want to go back. That's the Grow podcast now. I don't know what episode that is.
Yeah. What it says X. Romans 1 on it. Find that one. Probably like 104-ish, somewhere around there.
Something like that. But yeah
maybe 105.
Romans chapter 1, verse 16. So the gospel is first to the Jew, then for the Gentiles. So Jewish Christians need to accept Gentile Christians because God's ultimate purpose is to include them. So here's the thing. Remove that Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians and insert whatever group you think you are part of, and insert the Gentile Christians, whatever group you think are not
doing it right.
Doing it right. So we need to accept them because God's ultimate purpose is to include them. So those other people, on the other hand, need to remember that the other other group, the Gentile Christians, on the other hand, need to remember that the Jews have always been at the center of God's concerns and promises. So it's just, if we just all love one another and work on edifying one another and working with one another instead of being at each other's throats all the time, it'd be a much better place.
It would be. And then he uses a lot of quotes from the Old Testament in that next group of verses. Just something that Paul does a lot. Just because he's a show off. Look how much of the Bible I know. No, that's not why. He uses those to support his point, but especially, for both groups, right? For a Jewish Christian, being reminded that this has always been the plan. The plan has always been to include them. And like, I'm not just saying that because I'm Paul and I can see now, like, here's what Isaiah said, here's what these old scriptures that you've heard since you were a kid say. And then same thing for the Gentile, to be reminded, like you said, that, the Jews have been at the center of God's grace, but also he's always planned on bringing you in. So you don't need to feel like an outsider,
right?
Because your background is different, because he's always had this plan to include you into his promises.
That's true. So Paul cites 3 sections of the Jewish scriptures, the Torah, that's Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 43, in Romans 15, verse 10. So bear with me on this one. Paul is citing a lot. So that's the Torah. And then the prophets, that's Isaiah chapter 11, verse 10, in Romans 15, verse 12. And the writings, that's Psalms chapter 18, verse 49, in Romans 15, verse 9, and Psalms 117, verse 1, in Romans 15, verse 11. So things to note with all of these quotations that Paul had thrown at us. Number 1, all of them refer to the Gentiles. All of them refer to people who are not Jewish, not Jewish Christians. And the second point is 2 of them, verses 10 and 12, show that the Gentiles' presence with the people of God depends on the Jews. And then the third point is that 2 of them speak of all of them praising God. That's verses 9 and 11. So verse 11 also quotes the Old Testament. This verse calls on us Gentiles to join in praising God. So last, and here's another point from Paul. Paul quotes the messianic prophecy from Isaiah 11, verse 10, about how the root of Jesse will rule over nations and be the object of hope for Gentiles. Paul ends this with a sort of prayer wish. It's his prayer that an appeal to God to work among the Romans in such a way that the unity he urges on them becomes a reality. And I think for those who are really truly trying to be followers of Jesus, this is our prayer wish as well, even today, 2,000 years later, that God works among all of us in such a way that the unity becomes a reality. So here's the bottom line. Only when the Jews and us Gentiles rejoice together in our common hope. And again, you can remove the Jews and the Gentiles and insert whatever group and other group you have in your mind, as only when we rejoice together in our common hope will we be able to praise God as he wants to be praised, with the united hearts and voices of a community of believers. I mean, think about it. Wouldn't it be great if we all come together instead of isolating ourselves from the rest of the world because they're not doing it right? What did you say before? That story of the church. Oh, they're not doing communion right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They're not doing communion right. And you're going to isolate yourself from the rest of the world because of something like that.
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be like if instead of doing that, we all get together because the non-essentials are just non-essentials. That's why they're called non-essentials.
They're very aptly named.
Right?
Yep.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
The reason why they're called non-essentials is because they're not essential. They're not important. So in the non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity. St. Augustine just really nailed it.
Smart guy, you know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and be like, that guy was kind of smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one's
I
ever
think
said
so.
that before.
I
Everybody always rips that guy, but I've got his back. So,
I agree too.
all right, you have some questions for us today.
All right, so here are your
Let's jump in the
questions.
chat, by the way, and answer these questions. We'd love to hear your answers and be answering each other. We've fallen off a little bit in the chat as of late. We're not as active as we once were.
Yeah.
So let's jump back in and be that community of believers we're talking about. That's learning from each other, growing
It
together.
is important too. I mean, it's a way of edifying one another and supporting one another. And if you think they made a great comment that really speaks to you, let them know, encourage them, and just let's all be a community and help one another grow.
Yeah.
So here are your questions. Number 1, how deep does Jesus' acceptance of us go? I want you to think about that. How deep does Jesus' acceptance of us go? And if that's the case, how deep then should our acceptance of others go?
I was thinking when I was reading over your notes that we should have had the PH Church worship team come in and sing that How Deep the Father's Love for Us hymn from back in the day right here. Just like behind you as you're reading that question, like really high falsetto. Would have been great.
Or maybe Michael can insert something.
Maybe, yeah, you know what? Michael, just sing over the top of this.
Right.
Question 2.
Okay, question 2. What can you do to make praying for your friends and fellow church members a more central part of your service to others? Because that's something as simple as that really changes the way you think and view others.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean,
For
if
sure.
you haven't tried it, go try it. Try it for a week. That's my challenge. Try it for a week. See what happens. And then number 3, in what practical and tangible ways can we pursue harmony with one another?
By telling them all the things they do wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, did I do it?
You
Did
can
I do
try
it?
that
Did
for
I-
a week and see what happens.
Leo, your shirt has a hood, and we're in a church, which is unacceptable. So
Oh, my goodness.
we're no longer brothers. Just
Yeah,
ignore
and
my
hair
hood.
is past my ears. So.
Yeah, that's true. On this side, I'm seeing hair past your ears right now. I'm very upset.
I'm so sorry.
Let's answer some of those questions in the chat or in the comments. Not the chat. This isn't live. This one is not live. I talk into a microphone too often, and I confuse myself. Let's jump in the comments like we've always done. New Hope family, we love you so much. We're so thankful that you've been going through this study of Romans. We're getting so close.
Oh, yeah.
Our next week we're going verses 14 through 22.
This one is a 3-part.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're not finishing up Romans
Right.
15. So, but we're very, very close. So
very, very close.
Romans 15 verses 14 through 22. That's our reading for the next week. Let's make sure we're reading that together, and then just being proactive about ways to develop unity with our brothers and sisters this week. That's definitely, even if, a lot of us might be sitting here being like, I'm pretty good at this. I nail it. We can always find ways to be more welcoming and more loving of people.
That's right.
Especially people that are different than us. So let's focus on that this week. Thank you, Pastor Leo, for your teaching. Thanks to all of you for being here with us. We love you, and we will see you next time.
Hang on.